Tonight, we invite you to recline, to close your eyes, and to let your mind drift back through the veils of time. There is nothing you need to do, nothing to focus on too intently. Simply allow the story to wash over you, a gentle current carrying you toward the shores of slumber. We travel tonight to an ancient land, a kingdom built along the life-giving artery of the Nile, a place of golden sands, monumental ambition, and beliefs that shaped a civilization for millennia. This is the world of ancient Egypt, specifically the New Kingdom, a period of immense power and prosperity. But our story does not focus on the grand sweep of empire or the clash of armies. Instead, we will turn our gaze to a single remarkable life. A life that began within the gilded confines of a royal palace, born to the highest privilege, yet constrained by the unwritten laws of gender and expectation. We are going to explore the struggles of the first great female pharaoh, a woman named Hatshepsut. Do not worry about remembering names or dates. That is not the purpose of our journey. The details are simply colors in a larger tapestry, woven to create an atmosphere of calm and quiet contemplation. Let the rhythm of the narrative be your guide as you begin to relax, to let go of the day, and to imagine yourself in a world both distant and deeply human. If you enjoy these journeys into the past, I'd really appreciate a quick like or even a subscribe. It helps our small community of quiet history lovers grow more than you know. I'm always curious where you all are listening from, so feel free to drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. It's fascinating to see our global community connecting through these stories. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We begin our story in the sacred capital of Thebes, where a princess is born into a world of power, a world she was never expected to rule. Imagine the city of Thebes, not as it is today, a landscape of majestic ruins baking under a modern sun, but as it was in the 15th century BCE. Picture a sprawling, vibrant metropolis, the heart of the Egyptian empire. On the eastern bank of the Nile, where the sun rises, the city pulses with life. The great temple complex of Karnak stands as a city unto itself, a forest of colossal pillars and sacred enclosures dedicated to the god Amun-Ra, the king of the gods. Priests in clean white linen move through its courtyards, their chants a low hum that is the city's constant heartbeat. The air is thick with the scent of incense, of roasting meats from offerings, and the sweet, heavy perfume of lotus blossoms floating in sacred pools. This is Wasit, as the Egyptians called it, the capital of a triumphant nation. The Hyksos, foreign rulers who had dominated the north, were driven out generations ago, and the 18th dynasty, Hatshepsut's family line, has established an era of unprecedented wealth and influence. The city is a testament to this power. Mud brick homes of artisans and merchants line bustling, narrow streets, while the more opulent villas of nobles are hidden behind high walls, their gardens lush with sycamore figs and date palms. The Nile itself is a highway of commerce and faith, filled with the sails of trading vessels and the grand barges of religious processions. Across the river, on the west bank, lies the realm of the dead. This is the necropolis, a silent, sprawling city of tombs and mortuary temples, where the sun sets in a blaze of orange and purple, beginning its nightly journey through the underworld. Here, in a secluded valley, the pharaohs are laid to rest in hidden tombs, their passages painted with scenes to guide them through eternity. It is a place of profound silence and immense spiritual weight, a constant reminder that life on this earth is but a preparation for the next. It is into this world of divine kingship and sprawling power that a daughter is born to the pharaoh, Thutmose I, and his great royal wife, Amos. They name her Hatshepsut, meaning foremost of noble women. From her very first breath, she is surrounded by luxury and importance. The royal palace, likely a complex of buildings near the great temple at Karnak, is a world of its own. Unlike the stone temples built for eternity, the palace is constructed from mud brick, designed for the comfort of the living. Imagine yourself as a child in this place. The floors are cool underfoot, covered with woven reed mats. The walls are plastered and painted with vibrant scenes of nature, birds fluttering through papyrus thickets, fish swimming in stylized pools, and gardens overflowing with life. Sunlight streams through high, clerestory windows, illuminating rooms filled with the scent of cedar from Lebanon, used to craft the finest furniture. The air is filled with the low murmur of courtiers, the gentle strumming of a harp, and the distant sounds of the city beyond the palace walls. Hatshepsut is not just any noble child. She is of the purest royal blood. Her mother, Queen Ahmose, carries the direct lineage of the founding pharaohs of the dynasty, giving Hatshepsut a unique and potent claim to her heritage. This fact, this purity of blood, will become a cornerstone of her life, a source of immense pride, and eventually a justification for her ambition. Her education, like that of all royal children, begins early. The cap, or royal nursery, is not just a playroom but a school, where the offspring of the pharaoh and those of high-ranking officials are educated together. Imagine her learning alongside the sons and daughters of viziers and generals. The curriculum is practical, designed to create the future leaders of Egypt. She would have learned to read and write, a skill largely confined to the elite. Using a reed pen and a palette of black and red ink, she would have practiced the elegant, flowing script of hieratic on ostraca, shards of pottery or limestone, and later on precious papyrus. Her lessons would have been diverse. She would study mathematics, essential for managing the vast estates and construction projects of the kingdom. She would learn history, the stories of her ancestors who had unified the land and built its greatness. She would be tutored in geography, understanding the reach of Egypt's power from Nubia in the south to the lands of the Levant in the north. And she would have been steeped in theology, learning the complex pantheon of gods and goddesses whose favor was essential for the prosperity of the two lands. Yet, even in this privileged educational setting, there are unspoken rules, clear divisions based on gender. While the boys are trained for careers in the military and the administration, the path for a royal daughter is much narrower. Her primary purpose is to be a wife, a mother, and a vessel for the sacred royal bloodline. Girls from noble families were taught how to manage a large household, how to sing, dance, and play instruments, skills befitting a life of grace and influence, but not of direct rule. The most powerful position a woman could typically aspire to was that of great royal wife, the king's consort, a role of immense prestige but ultimately subordinate power. Hatshepsut, however, is given a title of unique significance. She is made the god's wife of Amun. This is not merely an honorary designation. The god's wife of Amun is the highest-ranking priestess in the cult of the most powerful god in the kingdom. It is a position of enormous religious and political influence, one that allows her to participate in sacred rituals that were often the exclusive domain of the pharaoh himself. In this role, she is not just a princess, she is the earthly consort of the god Amun, a symbolic marriage that connects the royal family directly to the divine. This position provides her with her own source of power, her own sphere of influence within the temple hierarchy at Karnak, independent of her father or a future husband. It is a seed of authority, planted early in her life. The rhythm of her young life is dictated by the cycles of the Nile and the religious calendar. She would have witnessed the great festivals, like the Opet festival, where the statues of the Theban gods were carried in a grand procession from Karnak to Luxor Temple, a journey of celebration that reaffirmed the connection between the pharaoh and the deities. The city would be alive with music, feasting, and reverence, a spectacle of power and faith that would have left an indelible mark on the young princess. Her world is one of ordered certainty. Her father, Thutmose the Firm, is a strong and successful pharaoh, a warrior king who expanded Egypt's borders. Her destiny seems clear. She will be married to a future king to secure the purity of the royal line. And so it comes to pass. When she is perhaps no more than 12 or 15 years old, she is married to her own half-brother, Thutmose II. This practice, while unsettling to modern sensibilities, was common within the Egyptian royal family. It was a political and religious strategy designed to keep the divine bloodline undiluted and to consolidate power within the immediate family. Her new husband, Thutmose II, is the son of Thutmose the Fun and a lesser wife, Mutnofret. This makes Hatshepsut's own bloodline superior to his. Her marriage to him is therefore essential, a way of legitimizing his claim to the throne. She is now the great royal wife, the Queen of Egypt. She fulfills her duty, bearing him a daughter, Neferua, but she does not produce a male heir. That role is filled by one of Thutmose II's secondary wives, a woman named Iset, who gives birth to a boy, the future Thutmose III. This simple fact of biology is critical. It means that while Hatshepsut is the queen, the mother of the next king is another woman. The line of succession will pass through her husband, but not through her own body. The constraints of her gender for a moment seem to be reasserting themselves. Then, the predictable course of her life is shattered. Thutmose II's reign is short. He dies young, possibly from a lingering illness, leaving behind a kingdom and a throne. His only son and designated heir, Thutmose III, is still a small child, perhaps even an infant. Egypt, a great and powerful empire, is now technically ruled by a boy who is too young to walk, too young to speak the words of command. A power vacuum is created. The intricate machinery of the state, the priesthood, the military, the vast bureaucracy, requires a firm hand at its center. According to tradition, the mother of the young king might act as regent, but Thutmose III's mother Iset is of a lesser status. The most powerful and highest-ranking woman in the court, the woman with the purest royal blood, the former god's wife of Amun, is the king's aunt and stepmother, Hatshepsut. The path laid out for her by tradition has come to an abrupt end. The role of queen consort is over. Before her lies a new and undefined path. She is named regent, the official guardian of the young king and the steward of his throne. It is a position of immense responsibility, but it is also a position of temporary, borrowed power. She is expected to rule in his name, to maintain the stability of the kingdom, and then, when he comes of age, to gracefully step aside. Imagine her in this moment of transition. She stands at a precipice. Behind her is the life she was born to lead, a life of immense privilege but clear limitations. Ahead of her is a future she must now carve out for herself. The air in the palace, once filled with the certainty of tradition, is now thick with unspoken questions. The courtiers watch her, the priests observe her, and the entire nation waits to see what this foremost of noble women will do. The struggle of the first female pharaoh has quietly, almost imperceptibly begun. She holds the reins of power, but for now she holds them for another. The world does not yet know that she has no intention of ever letting them go. And so, the great kingdom of Egypt finds itself in a delicate balance. A child sits upon the Horus throne in name, while a woman of immense capability holds the true scepter of power. This is the period of the regency, a time of quiet observation and careful maneuvering. Imagine the vast echoing halls of the palace at Thebes. The rhythm of life continues. The machinery of the state grinds on, but the central figure has changed. Hatshepsut is now the axis around which the court revolves. In these early years, she is meticulous in her observance of tradition. On public monuments and temple walls, the official narrative is clear. The boy king, Thutmose III, is depicted as the true pharaoh. He is shown in the classic poses of kingship, smiting Egypt's enemies, making offerings to the gods, and wearing the double crown of the two lands. He is the image of divine authority, the Horus on earth. And beside him, or often slightly behind him, stands Hatshepsut. She is depicted as the quintessential queen regent, elegant, supportive, her hands often raised in a gesture of protection over her young charge. She is the dutiful guardian, the vessel of power, but not its source. Yet, this is a carefully constructed fiction, a necessary illusion for a conservative court. The reality of daily rule is quite different. The child Thutmose III is occupied in the royal nursery, learning his letters, playing with his toys, surrounded by his tutors. He is being prepared for a future of kingship, but that future is still distant. The present belongs to Hatshepsut. It is she who wakes with the sun and meets with the most powerful men in the kingdom. Picture her in the audience chamber. Sunlight, softened by linen curtains, falls in long shafts across the painted floor. The air is still and heavy with the weight of governance. Before her stands the vizier, the chief minister of the state, his head bowed in respect. He brings reports from every corner of the kingdom, the height of the Nile's inundation, the yields of the grain harvests, the judgments from provincial courts. She listens with a practiced stillness, her expression unreadable. Her questions are precise, her commands clear. There is no hint of hesitation. She is not merely passing messages to a future king. She is making decisions that will shape the course of the empire. Next comes the treasurer, the overseer of the royal treasury. He details the vast wealth flowing into Egypt. Gold from the mines of Nubia, cedar from Byblos, copper from the Sinai. He speaks of expenditures, of the cost of maintaining the army, the priesthood, and the thousands of artisans and laborers working on state projects. Hatshepsut understands that wealth is power. She approves budgets, authorizes payments, and directs the flow of resources with a steady hand. She is building a network of loyalty, ensuring that the officials who run the country owe their positions and their prosperity to her, not just to the idea of a child king. Then there is the high priest of Amun-Ra, the most powerful religious figure in the land. This is a relationship she has cultivated since her youth as the god's wife of Amun. She understands the priesthood is not just a spiritual body, but a political and economic force of immense power. The temples control vast tracts of land, huge herds of cattle, and storehouses overflowing with grain. Their support is not just desirable, it is essential. She meets with the high priest not as a supplicant, but as a partner. She makes generous donations to the temple of Amun at Karnak, honoring the god who is the divine father of the pharaohs. She frames these acts as piety, as fulfilling the duty of the king, but they are also strategic investments, securing the allegiance of the men who speak for the gods. The rhythm of her life is a slow, deliberate consolidation of power. She is demonstrating day by day that the kingdom is not just stable under her rule, but that it is thriving. She avoids any grand disruptive gestures. There is no sudden seizure of power, no dramatic confrontation. Instead, she allows her competence to speak for itself. She is weaving herself so deeply into the fabric of the state that to remove her would be to unravel the entire tapestry. Her first bold public acts are in the realm of architecture, the most enduring statement of a pharaoh's power. A ruler's legitimacy was written in stone for all of eternity to see. Initially, her commissions are carefully framed. She orders the creation of new shrines within the sprawling complex of Karnak, dedicated to Amun, the god who is now so closely tied to her own authority. The official inscriptions state that these works are done on behalf of His Majesty, the King of Upper and Lower Egypt, Thutmose III. It is a continuation of the public fiction, but everyone at court, the priests, the nobles, the scribes, knows who truly conceived of these projects, who commanded the architects, and who authorized the payment for the thousands of tons of red quartzite and polished granite. Imagine the slow, patient work of these projects. The quarrymen in the distant southern hills of Aswan, striking their dolerite pounders against the hard granite day after day under the searing sun. The sound is a constant, rhythmic tapping. They are freeing immense blocks of stone from the earth, blocks that will become obelisks and statues. Think of the journey of these colossal stones, carefully loaded onto massive wooden barges, to be floated down the Nile during the annual inundation. The river, swollen and brown, becomes a highway for her ambition, carrying the raw materials of her legacy northward to Thebes. Once there, the sculptors and masons take over. You can almost hear the gentle scraping and chipping of their tools as they smooth the surfaces, and the meticulous work of the scribes as they lay out the hieroglyphs to be carved. These carvings tell the official story, but they also begin to subtly shift the narrative. Perhaps a relief shows Hatshepsut standing not behind the king, but beside him, her figure of equal size. Perhaps an inscription gives her a title that edges closer to pharaonic authority, blending her regent's titles with epithets of rulership. Each change is small, almost unnoticeable on its own, but together they represent a gradual, deliberate evolution of her public image. She is a master of propaganda, using the most permanent media available to her. She commissions a pair of magnificent red granite obelisks at Karnak, towering needles of stone that pierce the sky. They are technical marvels, a testament to the skill of her engineers and a bold declaration of her power. The inscriptions on them recount her divine birth, emphasizing her direct lineage from the god Amun and her father, Thutmose III. She is not just the king's regent, she is the god's own daughter, chosen for greatness. The story she is telling is one of divine destiny, a narrative that gently pushes the young Thutmose III into the background. She rules for 7 years in this manner, as regent. 7 years of peace and growing prosperity. The harvests are good, trade flourishes, and the borders are secure. She has proven herself to be a capable and effective ruler. She has the loyalty of the army, the support of the priesthood, and the administrative machinery of the state firmly in her grasp. The initial fiction of the regency has begun to wear thin. The idea that this powerful, competent woman is merely a placeholder for a boy who is still years away from manhood seems increasingly implausible. The transition, when it comes, is not a single event, but the culmination of this long, quiet campaign. She has laid the groundwork so carefully that the final step feels less like a usurpation and more like an inevitability. The court has grown accustomed to her authority. The country has prospered under her command. The gods, through their priests, have signaled their approval of her pious building works. The power she has wielded in the shadows is now ready to be brought into the light. She begins to use the full titulary of a pharaoh, adopting the 5 great names that belong to the king alone. She starts to appear in reliefs, wearing the regalia of kingship, not just the crowns, but but the symbolic garments that have been the exclusive right of male rulers for over 1,000 years. The quiet rise behind the throne is over. She is preparing to step forward, to take her place not as the king's guardian, but as king herself. The question is no longer if she will rule, but how the world will accept a woman as the living embodiment of the god Horus, a pharaoh in her own right. The stage is set for an act almost unthinkable, an act that will change the course of Egyptian history. The 7 years of the regency have passed like the slow, steady flooding of the Nile. Each year has deposited another layer of stability, another stratum of prosperity. The land is secure, the granaries are full, the temples are honored, and the child king, Thutmose III, grows within the secluded world of the palace. But for Hatshepsut, the regent, this period of borrowed authority has reached its natural limit. The role of a temporary steward, however powerful, is a garment that no longer fits. It is too small for her ambition, too confining for her proven capability. A regency is, by its very nature, a bridge, and she has reached the other side. Imagine her in a moment of quiet contemplation, perhaps in a private chamber of the palace overlooking a tranquil garden. The hum of the court is a distant murmur. Before her lies a choice of immense gravity, a decision that has no true precedent in the 1,000-year history of her nation. She can continue as she is, holding the reins of power while the official glory belongs to her young stepson, and then, as he blossoms into a man, gracefully recede into the background, becoming the Dowager Queen, a figure of respect, but of dwindling influence. This is the path of tradition, the path of safety. It is the path everyone expects, or she can choose the other path. A path that does not yet exist, one that she must cut herself from the raw bedrock of tradition and theology. This is the path to full pharaonic power, to claim the titles, the crowns, and the divine authority for herself. It is an act of breathtaking audacity, a step that risks throwing the cosmic order, the very principle of Maat, into chaos. To do this, she cannot simply be a queen who rules. She must, in a way the world has never seen, become the king. This transformation is not a single, impulsive act of coronation. It is a slow, deeply considered metamorphosis, a campaign waged not with armies on a battlefield, but with symbols and theology in the minds of her people. It begins with her closest and most loyal officials, the inner circle of men whose fortunes are inextricably tied to her own. Chief among them is the high priest of Amun, Hatshepsut, a man who holds the keys to the kingdom's spiritual heart. There is also Senenmut, the brilliant and ambitious steward, tutor to her daughter Neferu, and perhaps the closest confidant she has. In quiet councils, under the watchful eyes of painted gods on temple walls, the strategy is forged. They cannot simply ignore the fact that she is a woman. To do so would be to deny reality. Instead, they must create a new reality, a theological argument so powerful that it transcends gender. They must prove that her ascension is not an act of human ambition, but the manifest will of the gods. They reach back to the title she held in her youth, the god's wife of Amun, and to the story of her own parentage. They begin to refine and elaborate upon the narrative of her divine birth. The story, which will later be carved for all to see on the walls of her temple, proclaims that the great god Amun-Ra himself desired to create a ruler to bring order to the land. He descended from the heavens, and taking the form of her father, the pharaoh Thutmose III, he visited the sleeping queen Ahmose. From this divine union, the story declares, Hatshepsut was conceived. This is not mere propaganda. It is the construction of a divine mandate. It reframes her entire existence. She is not simply a mortal woman who inherited royal blood. She is the chosen daughter of the king of the gods, conceived for the express purpose of ruling. Her gender becomes secondary to her divine origin. Who could argue with the will of Amun-Ra himself? This narrative becomes the theological cornerstone of her reign, a story repeated by priests and inscribed by scribes, slowly seeping into the consciousness of the nation. With the divine justification in place, the outward transformation can begin. The first and most profound change is in her name. A pharaoh is not known by a single name, but by a five-fold titulary, a series of 5 names that define his nature and his relationship to the gods and the state. For a woman to assume this titulary is a radical act. Imagine the scribes in the House of Life, the temple scriptorium, their reed pens poised over fresh sheets of papyrus. Their task is to craft a royal identity for someone who breaks all the established molds. One by one, she takes the names. The Horus name, which connects her to the falcon god, the embodiment of living kingship. The Two Ladies name, which places her under the protection of the goddesses of Upper and Lower Egypt. The Golden Horus name, which associates her with the triumph of the divine over chaos. But the most important are the final two, the throne name, or praenomen, and the birth name, or nomen. Her birth name, Hatshepsut, is enclosed within the sacred oval of a cartouche, a privilege reserved for royalty. But it is the throne name that will be her primary identity as ruler. She chooses it with immense care, Matkare. Let us rest on this name for a moment. Maat, the concept of truth, justice, balance, and cosmic order. K, the soul or life force, and Re, the sun god. Together, Matkare can be understood as truth is the soul of the sun god, or more elegantly, the spirit of cosmic order. It is a name that is also a promise and a political manifesto. In a single word, she declares that her reign is not a disruption of the natural order, but its very fulfillment. She is the champion of Maat, the one who will ensure that the universe remains in balance. It is a name of profound power and unimpeachable piety. Now this new identity must be given a physical form. The art of Egypt is not meant to be a realistic portrait of an individual. It is a system of symbols, a visual language designed to convey a person's role and nature. The role of Pharaoh has a specific, immutable visual grammar, and that grammar is exclusively male. This presents her artists with a unique and difficult challenge. In the first few years of her self-declared reign, you can see them wrestling with this problem. The images are transitional, almost experimental. We see reliefs of Hatshepsut with the slender, graceful body of a woman, but wearing the great crowns of a king. She's shown in a female sheath dress, but holding the crook and flail, the male symbols of kingship. These early images are beautiful, but they are ideologically awkward. They depict a female ruler, a queen, but not a king. And for her power to be absolute, she must occupy the office of king in its entirety. So, a final, revolutionary decision is made. On the public monuments, in the temple reliefs, and in the grand statues that will stand for eternity, Hatshepsut will not be depicted as a woman at all. She will be shown as a man. Imagine the master sculptor in his workshop, a block of red Aswan granite before him. He has been given a commission unlike any he has ever received. He must carve the image of the pharaoh, Matkare. He knows the timeless formulas by heart. The figure must be broad-shouldered and narrow-waisted. He carves the powerful, idealized muscles of a man's chest and arms. He chisels the strong, muscular legs, set in the traditional striding pose of a king, 1 foot forward, radiating purpose and power. He carves the royal kilt, the shendit, pleated and wrapped around the hips. This is the garment of a male ruler, a symbol of his virility and authority. He leaves the chest bare as a king's chest should be. And then comes the most iconic element of all. He carves the false beard. The divine beard is not a disguise. No one at court is meant to believe that Hatshepsut has suddenly grown a beard. It is not a tool of deception, but a piece of sacred regalia, as symbolic as a crown or a scepter. The gods were depicted with beards, and the pharaoh, as a living god, wore one in rituals to signify his divine status. It is long, plaited, and curved at the end, the mark of divinity. By attaching this beard to her chin in her statues and reliefs, she is not hiding her womanhood. She is stating, in the clearest visual language possible, that she is occupying the sacred office of Pharaoh, an office that carries with it this male attribute. The individual is subsumed by the timeless divine role. And finally, the face. The face is often serene, majestic, and youthful. It is the idealized face of a pharaoh, radiating calm and power. But here and there, the artists leave a clue. Perhaps the face is slightly more rounded, the features a little softer than those of her father, Thutmose the Pharaoh. The official inscriptions use masculine pronouns, referring to her as His Majesty, Lord of the Two Lands, Son of Ra. Yet sometimes they slip, and a feminine ending will appear in the hieroglyphs, a subtle acknowledgement of the truth that everyone knows. These are not mistakes. They are the complex layers of a new identity, a king who is also a woman. The unveiling of this new iconography must have been a moment of profound shock and awe. Imagine a new temple courtyard being opened for a festival. The courtiers and priests gather. They see the towering statues for the first time, not of a queen regent, but of a male pharaoh, Matkare, with broad shoulders, a king's kilt, and the divine beard. Yet with a face they know to be that of Hatshepsut. There must have been whispers. There must have been a deep, conservative unease among some of the old noble families, who saw this as a violation of sacred tradition. She has not just taken power, she has taken an identity, an image that had been reserved for men since the dawn of their civilization. But the sheer confidence of the act, its execution in magnificent, towering stone, would have silenced most open dissent. Her power is now absolute, her theological justification is in place, and her image projects an aura of timeless, serene, and unquestionable authority. The metamorphosis is complete. She has shed the skin of the regent and emerged, resplendent and transformed, as the king of Upper and Lower Egypt. She is no longer Hatshepsut, the foremost of noble women. She is Matkare, His Majesty the Pharaoh. The quiet rise behind the throne has concluded with the loudest statement imaginable, written not in words, but in granite and gold. To wear the crown is one thing, to command the loyalty of a kingdom is another entirely. The transformation of Hatshepsut into the Pharaoh Matkare was a triumph of theology and iconography, a masterstroke of public image. But the magnificent statues and the divine titles, while essential, do not run an empire. The true foundation of her long and stable reign was built not just on stone, but on the intricate and often invisible webs of politics, patronage, and personal loyalty. It was built in the quiet daily rhythm of governance. Imagine the royal court at Thebes, now settled into this new and unprecedented reality. A woman is king. The initial shock has subsided, replaced by the quiet hum of a bureaucracy that has accepted its new center of gravity. The sun rises each morning over the eastern cliffs, casting its first rays onto the golden tips of the obelisks at Karnak, and the day's work begins. For Hatshepsut, this work is the delicate, constant art of maintaining balance, of being the still point in the turning world of the Egyptian state. Her power is not wielded through overt force or threats. She is not a tyrant who rules by fear. Her authority is rooted in her divine mandate, her proven competence, and her masterful ability to manage the powerful factions that make up the elite. Her court is a complex ecosystem of priests, generals, scribes, and nobles, each with their own ambitions and allegiances. To rule them is to understand them, to anticipate their needs, and to bind their success to her own. Let us draw back the veil and look upon the key figures who form the pillars of her throne, the men whose loyalty she cultivated and whose talents she harnessed. First and foremost is the man whose name is more entwined with hers than any other, Senenmut. Senenmut was not born to the highest echelons of power. His origins were modest, likely from a provincial family of some standing, but not of the great Theban nobility. He was a self-made man, a testament to the fact that in the new kingdom, talent and ambition could pave a path to the very heart of power. He enters the historical record as a minor official, but his rise under Hatshepsut is nothing short of meteoric. He becomes her ultimate courtier, her most trusted advisor, a man who wears a dizzying array of titles. Imagine him now moving through the halls of the palace. He is the chief steward of Amun, managing the vast economic empire of the temple, the very institution that provides Hatshepsut with her divine legitimacy. In this role, he oversees storehouses, fields, and workshops, controlling a significant portion of the nation's wealth. He is also the overseer of the works, the master architect and project manager for her most ambitious building projects, including the towering obelisks and her magnificent mortuary temple. The vision may be Hatshepsut's, but the execution, the mind-numbingly complex logistics of quarrying, transporting, and erecting these colossal structures, falls to Senenmut. But perhaps his most intimate role is that of steward of the king's daughter Neferua. He is the personal tutor and guardian of Hatshepsut's only child. This places him within the innermost sanctum of the royal family. We can picture him in a sunlit palace classroom, patiently guiding the young princess's hand as she learns to write the sacred hieroglyphs. He is not just teaching her to read and write. He is shaping the mind of the royal heir, instilling in her the values and knowledge befitting her station. This position of trust is absolute. It signals a bond that transcends mere politics. The relationship between Hatshepsut and Senenmut has been the subject of speculation for centuries, but we need not imagine romance to understand its depth. It was a relationship of profound synergy, a partnership of shared ambition and mutual reliance. He was the brilliant implementer of her grand vision, and his power was a direct reflection of her own. His loyalty was rewarded with unprecedented access and wealth, and he, in turn, dedicated his considerable talents to cementing her legacy in stone. The second pillar of her rule stands within the hallowed walls of Karnak Temple. This is Hatshepsut, the high priest of Amun-Ra. While Senenmut manages the temporal and economic power of the court, Hatshepsut commands its spiritual power. As the man who speaks for the king of the gods, his support is non-negotiable. Hatshepsut has secured this not by force, but by making herself the greatest benefactor the temple has ever known. The alliance is one of mutual benefit. Picture the two of them in a quiet temple sanctuary, the air thick with the scent of Kai-Fi incense. The only light coming from flickering oil lamps that make the carved gods on the walls seem to breathe in the gloom. He, the high priest, confirms the divine oracle that proclaims her the chosen of Amun. She, the Pharaoh, then bestows upon the temple immense wealth, lands, cattle, gold, and silver. This wealth allows the priesthood to grow in influence, and in return, the priests use that influence to continuously affirm her legitimate, God-given right to rule. It is a perfect self-reinforcing cycle of power and piety. Hatshepsut, who also serves as vizier for a time, is the linchpin of this sacred contract, ensuring that the will of the heavens, as interpreted by the temple, always aligns with the will of the pharaoh. But what of the military, the traditional power base of the pharaohs of the 18th dynasty? Her father was a warrior king. Her husband was a warrior king. She, however, is not. Her reign is remarkable for its lack of major military campaigns. This could have been a weakness, a reason for the generals to see her as a lesser ruler. But Hatshepsut turns this into a strength, and in doing so, she solves the single greatest threat to her reign, the existence of the other king, her stepson, Thutmose III. Let us consider the delicate situation of the young man. He is not in a dungeon, he is not exiled. He is not a prisoner in the palace. To have harmed him would have been to declare war on tradition and to risk a violent backlash. Hatshepsut is far too clever for that. Instead, she incorporates him into her government in the one area she has chosen to avoid. As he grows from a child into a teenager and then a young man, Thutmose III is given command of the army. Imagine the young Thutmose, his body strong and hardened by training, standing before the ranks of Egyptian soldiers. He is taught archery, chariot warfare, and military strategy. He leads the army on small-scale campaigns to secure the borders in Nubia to the south, or to quell minor uprisings in the Levant. He is fulfilling the traditional role of a warrior prince. This is a stroke of political genius on Hatshepsut's part. It keeps the young, energetic Thutmose occupied and allows him to build his own reputation in a sphere that does not directly challenge her authority. It keeps the generals loyal, as they have a royal commander to lead them in the field, and it presents to the world an image of stability. The wise, pious Pharaoh, Matkare, governs the spiritual and civil life of the nation from Thebes, while her designated heir, the vigorous Thutmose III, guards its borders. The arrangement creates a unique form of co-regency. On temple walls, they are sometimes shown together, he often depicted as a smaller figure behind her, the junior partner in this silent contract. She holds the ultimate power, the titles, the crowns, the control over the state's wealth and religion. He holds the command of the army, a power that is formidable but that remains, for now, loyal to her reign. It is a delicate balance, a constant unspoken negotiation, and for 20 years she maintains it perfectly. The rhythm of governance is slow and deliberate. Imagine a formal audience in the great hall of the palace. Envoys from Crete arrive, bearing gifts of finely painted pottery. Nubian chieftains, their skin dark and gleaming, present tribute of gold dust, ebony, and leopard skins. Hatshepsut, seated on the gilded throne, adorned in the full male regalia of kingship, receives them. Her face is a serene mask of power. Senenmut stands nearby, observing every detail. The scribes, sitting cross-legged on the floor, record every word, every gift, their reed brushes flying across the papyrus. This is the empire at peace, an empire run not by the sword, but by diplomacy, trade, and an unshakable sense of its own divine order. Her reign is a time of meticulous administration. She dispatches officials to inspect the irrigation canals that water the fields, ensuring the harvests will be plentiful. She oversees the courts of justice, where the vizier, acting in her name, hears disputes and upholds the law. She is a builder, an administrator, a diplomat, and a high priestess, all in one. She has not simply taken the role of king, she has fully inhabited it, mastering all the quiet, unglamorous, and essential arts of rule that give the title its true meaning. Her power is absolute, not because she seized it in a moment of drama, but because she earned it, day by day, through 2 decades of peaceful, prosperous, and masterful governance. The kingdom is calm, the people are content, and her legacy, she believes, is secure. A kingdom, like a person, can have a season of flourishing. For Egypt under the pharaoh Matkare, that season had arrived. The internal machinery of the state, so carefully calibrated by Hatshepsut, ran with a quiet and steady rhythm. The priesthood was content, the military was occupied, the treasury was full, and the land was at peace. A lesser ruler might have simply enjoyed this stability, maintaining the status quo, their reign a placid and unremarkable lake. But Hatshepsut's ambition was not merely to maintain, but to create, to achieve feats that would echo through eternity, to give her reign a substance that went beyond competent administration. The pharaohs of her dynasty had built their legends on conquest, on the lists of vanquished cities and the tribute of defeated kings. She would build her legend differently. Hers would be a legacy of creation, of piety, and of a journey into the realm of myth itself. Her reign was a conscious turning inward, a decision to cultivate Egypt's own garden, rather than seeking to conquer the lands of others. This choice was embodied in 2 magnificent achievements, twin peaks of her time in power that defined her as a ruler of prosperity, not of war. The first was a daring voyage to a semi-mythical land. The second was the creation of a building so beautiful and unique that it would become her ultimate, undeniable signature upon the landscape of history. It began, as all great royal undertakings did, with the voice of a god, or at least with the official proclamation of a god's desire. The priests of Amun-Ra at Karnak, the spiritual heart of the empire, delivered a divine oracle. The great god himself, they declared, wished for the ways to his land to be explored, for the paths to Punt to be navigated. He commanded his daughter, Matkare, to send an expedition to this fabled place, the god's land, and to bring back its wonders for his temple. Chief among these wonders was her Antu, the sacred myrrh and frankincense, the fragrant resins that were burned as holy incense, their smoke carrying prayers to the heavens. To us, this may sound like a simple trade mission, but in the Egyptian mind, it was a sacred pilgrimage. Punt was a land of legend, a place far to the south on the distant shores of the Red Sea. It was the ancestral home of the gods, a place of exotic marvels and untold riches. To travel there was not just a commercial venture. It was an act of profound piety, a fulfillment of divine will. And for Hatshepsut, it was a perfect opportunity. A mission undertaken at the express command of Amun would only strengthen her bond with the priesthood and further legitimize her rule. It was a quest that was both deeply religious and politically brilliant. The preparations for such a journey were immense, a testament to the organizational power of the Egyptian state under her steward, Senenmut. The mission could not depart from the Nile. Punt lay on the shores of what the Egyptians called the Great Green, the Red Sea. And so, a base was established on the coast, at a port we now know as Wadi Gawassis. To get there, everything had to be transported overland from the Nile Valley, a grueling journey across the barren eastern desert. Imagine the slow, patient work. The shipwrights and carpenters are assembled. They are not building warships, designed for ramming and conflict, but trading vessels, the Egyptian kebnit. These are long, elegant ships, built from planks of imported cedar from Lebanon. Picture the wood, smelling faintly of its distant forest home. The planks are not nailed together, but meticulously stitched with immensely strong rope, a technique that gives the hulls a flexibility needed for the sea. They are long and narrow, with a gentle curve, designed for crews of around 30 men. A single, vast square sail, woven from linen, is mounted on a central mast, ready to catch the prevailing winds. Long, heavy steering oars are fitted at the stern, and ranks of rowing benches line the sides, for the hard work of maneuvering in calm winds or close to shore. 5 such ships are prepared, a small but powerful fleet, ready to sail into the unknown. But it is not just the ships. Think of the supplies needed for a journey that could last many months, even years. Jars of beer and wine, baskets of dried fish and bread, water skins filled from the life-giving Nile. Then there is the cargo for trade. The Egyptians did not use currency in the way we do. Trade was barter. So the ships are loaded with the products of Egyptian workshops, brightly coloured faience beads, necklaces of polished stone, bronze daggers and axes, fine linen textiles, and simple pottery. These were not treasures to the Egyptians, but to a people without such industries, they were valuable luxuries. Finally, the personnel, a contingent of sailors, of course, but also a detachment of soldiers for protection, a high-ranking official to act as the pharaoh's envoy, and, crucially, a scribe, whose duty it is to record every landmark, every event, every item traded, his papyrus rolls and reed pens carefully packed in a wooden chest. Finally, all is ready. Under a blazing sun, the expedition leader makes a final offering at a small coastal shrine to the gods, praying for a safe return. Then the command is given. The great linen sails are unfurled, catching the northerly wind. The ships pull away from the shore, their prows turning south. The journey to Punt has begun. Let your mind drift and imagine the slow passage of time on one of these vessels. The rhythm of the days is dictated by the sun and the sea. The coastline of Africa is a constant presence to the west, a long, hazy line of desert and distant mountains. Navigation is by sight, by experience, and at night, by the familiar patterns of the stars. The world shrinks to the wooden deck of the ship. The sounds are the creak of the ropes, the groan of the hull, the steady flap of the great sail, and the rhythmic chant of the rowers when the wind dies down. The air smells of salt, hot wood, and the close quarters of the crew. It is a journey of immense patience, of trust in the ship, in the captain, and in the gods who commanded this voyage. Weeks slide by. The sun grows hotter. The constellations shift in the night sky. They are moving deeper and deeper into a world far from the familiar comforts of the Nile. Then one day, the landscape begins to change. The barren desert coast gives way to greener shores. Strange trees, unlike the palms and sycamores of Egypt, dot the hillsides. The air grows heavier, thick with the scent of unknown vegetation and damp earth. They have arrived. They have reached the gods' land. The scene of their arrival is immortalized on the walls of Hatshepsut's temple. The Egyptian ships are shown moored, the gangplanks down. They are met by the people of Punt. Imagine the contrast. The Egyptians in their clean white linen kilts. The people of Punt with their dark skin, their simple loincloths, and their distinct hairstyles. They live in unusual houses, dome-shaped structures woven from reeds, built up on stilts to protect them from the ground. It is a world away from the mud-brick villas and stone temples of Thebes. The leader of the expedition is greeted by the chief of Punt, a man named Pharaoh, and his wife, Ati, a woman depicted in the reliefs as strikingly large. The meeting is not one of conquest. There are no drawn weapons. Instead, it is a scene of peaceful diplomacy. The Egyptian envoy offers the trade goods, which are laid out on tables for inspection. In return, the people of Punt offer the fabled treasures of their land. This is the heart of the mission. Imagine the scene of barter. The Egyptians receive heaps of fragrant resin, the precious myrrh, some of it in loose, granular form, some of it still fresh on the branch. This is the scent of the divine, the perfume of the temple. But they have been given a command not just to bring back myrrh, but to bring it back alive. And so, the Egyptians carefully dig up young myrrh and frankincense saplings, their entire root balls wrapped in baskets. 31 of these living trees are loaded onto the decks of the ships, a living, growing treasure. This has never been done before. To transplant the sacred trees of the gods' land to the soil of Egypt is an act of supreme piety and botanical audacity. But there is more. The ships are filled with the other riches of Punt. Great stacks of dark, heavy ebony wood, piles of ivory tusks taken from the elephants of this southern land, rings of pure gold and mounds of electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver. And then there are the exotic animals, creatures of myth to the Egyptians. Live panthers, monkeys, and even a giraffe, its long neck towering over the sailors. The ships, which arrived laden with simple tools and beads, are now overflowing with the most exotic and sacred treasures imaginable. The return journey is slow and careful, the crew now tending to a living cargo of trees and animals. When they finally arrive back at the Red Sea port, their success is absolute. A great procession is formed to carry the treasures across the desert to Thebes. Imagine the spectacle of this caravan arriving in the capital. The citizens of Thebes would have stared in wonder at the dark-skinned people of Punt, marching alongside them, at the strange animals, and at the impossible sight of living trees from the legendary gods' land. The climax is the formal presentation. Hatshepsut, in her full pharaonic regalia, leads a procession to the temple of Karnak. She presents the bounty to the image of her divine father, Amun-Ra. The scribes weigh and measure the gold and electrum. The incense is piled on the altars, and for the first time, its sacred smoke fills the temple courts from a fresh and abundant supply. And in the temple gardens, under the careful watch of the priests, the 31 myrrh trees are planted in Egyptian soil. She has done the impossible. She has fulfilled the oracle. she has brought the God's land to Egypt. The story of this incredible journey would become the centerpiece of the other great achievement of her reign, her mortuary temple. While the voyage to Punt was a temporary event, her temple would be her eternal statement. Let us travel across the Nile from the bustling city of Thebes and the temple of Karnak to the silent western bank, the land of the setting sun. Here, beneath a towering, sun-baked amphitheater of golden cliffs, Hatshepsut chose the site for her memorial, her mansion of 1,000,000 years. The location itself is one of breathtaking beauty and power, a natural bay in the cliffs of Deir el-Bahri. It feels like a place where the divine could naturally reside. Here, she, with the genius of Senenmut as her architect, did not build just another mortuary temple in the traditional style. She created something entirely new. She built a temple that did not seek to dominate the landscape, but to become one with it. She called it Djeser, the Holy of Holies, or the sublimest of the sublime. Imagine yourself approaching it as an ancient visitor would have. You walk down a long causeway, once lined with the impassive stone faces of sphinxes. Before you, the temple rises not as a single massive building, but as a series of 3 broad colonnaded terraces connected by wide sloping ramps. It appears to ascend into the cliff face itself, the white limestone of its pillars, almost glowing against the orange and gold of the rock behind it. The design is one of clean lines, of order, of a profound and calming rhythm. You walk up the first ramp to the lower terrace. This broad, open space was once a sacred garden. Here, it is believed, were planted the myrrh trees from Punt, their leaves providing dappled shade and their fragrance filling the air, a living testament to her great expedition. You are walking through the success of her reign. You continue up the second, grander ramp to the middle terrace. Here, you are flanked by 2 long covered porticos, or colonnades. Their ceilings protect you from the sun, and their walls are covered in the most exquisite, finely painted reliefs. This is the storybook of her reign. To your right is the Punt colonnade. Here, the entire story of the Great Voyage is laid out in meticulous detail. You can see the ships with their sails unfurled, the strange huts of the people of Punt, the chief Pharaoh and his wife Ati, the scenes of peaceful trade, the loading of the myrrh trees and the exotic animals. The temple relief is a permanent record, a silent narrator telling the story of her greatest peaceful triumph for all eternity. On the other side of the terrace is the Divine Birth colonnade. Here an even more important story is told. You see the reliefs depicting the god Amun taking the form of her father, Thutmose the Firm, and approaching her mother, Queen Ahmose. You see the moment of her divine conception and the gods proclaiming that she is destined to rule. It is her ultimate political and religious justification, carved in stone for every visitor to see. She is not a usurper, she is the fulfillment of a divine plan. Finally, you ascend the last ramp to the highest terrace. This is the most sacred part of the temple. A long serene line of statues of Hatshepsut as the god Osiris stands sentinel. Beyond them, at the very center, is the entrance to the main sanctuary of Amun-Ra, a holy chamber cut directly into the living rock of the cliff. To step inside is to move from the bright, hot sun of the outside world into a cool, dark, and holy space. The air is still and silent. This is the culmination of the temple's journey, a place where her spirit could commune directly with her divine father. Djeser is more than a tomb. It is her autobiography, her political manifesto, her monument to peace, and a masterpiece of architectural harmony. The voyage to Punt provided the narrative, a story of piety and prosperity. The temple provided the eternal stage on which that story could be told. Together, they represent the apex of her reign, a golden age of peace, creativity, and unshakable confidence, all presided over by a female king whose legacy was now, she believed, as permanent as the stone from which it was carved. A great work of art, once completed, takes on a life of its own. It stands, serene and finished, for all to see. Hatshepsut's masterpiece was her reign itself, and its crowning jewels, the voyage to Punt and the temple of Djeser, were now complete. The story they told was one of divine will, peaceful prosperity, and unassailable authority. To the outside world, and to the eternal record she was so carefully crafting, her position was absolute. The kingdom was a perfectly ordered garden, and she was its master gardener. But even in the most tranquil garden, shadows lengthen and change with the passing of the sun. And beneath the serene surface of this golden age, there was one profound, abiding, and unspoken complexity. It was the question of the other king. For 2 decades, Egypt had existed in a state of delicate and unprecedented duality. It had one pharaoh on the throne, His Majesty Matkare, but it had another pharaoh waiting in the wings, a man who also bore the title of king, a man who commanded the army, Thutmose III. The relationship between Hatshepsut and her stepson was the silent, central drama of her reign. It was a political reality so unique and so potentially volatile that it had to be managed with constant, unspoken care. It was a silent contract, an understanding built not on words, but on a careful division of the world. Let us imagine the kingdom of Egypt during these years as having 2 distinct centers of gravity. The first, and by far the more brilliant, was in Thebes. This was Hatshepsut's world. It was a realm of stone and faith, of administration and diplomacy. Its rhythms were the slow, deliberate pace of temple construction, the endless cycle of religious festivals, and the quiet rustle of papyrus in the halls of the bureaucracy. Her court was filled with architects like the great Senenmut, with high priests like Hapuseneb, with scribes, treasurers, and viziers. It was a world of immense wealth, of sophisticated culture, and of power expressed through piety and creation. Her concerns were the height of the Nile, the success of the harvest, the proper worship of the gods, and the eternal message that her monuments would send to future generations. Then there was the other world, the world of Thutmose III. His court was not in a palace. It was a mobile court of the battlefield and the military camp. Its home was wherever the army of Egypt was stationed. Its rhythms were the tramp of soldiers' feet on dusty ground, the thud of arrows striking practice targets, the neighing of horses, and the sharp commands of officers. His companions were not priests and architects, but generals and chariot commanders. His world smelled not of incense, but of dust, sweat, and oiled leather. His concerns were the security of the fortresses in Nubia, the loyalty of the vassal princes in the Levant, and the readiness of his men for battle. He was the guardian of the borders, the sharp edge of Egypt's power. This division was a work of political genius, a way to contain and channel the immense energy and ambition of the young man who was, by all traditional rights, the true heir to the throne. By placing him in charge of the army, Hatshepsut gave him a domain that was powerful, respected, and, most importantly, far from the central seat of political power in Thebes. She allowed him to become the very embodiment of the traditional warrior pharaoh that she herself had chosen not to be. Let your mind drift and imagine the life of the young Thutmose during these years. He is growing from a boy into a man of vigor and intelligence. He is not a prisoner. He is the commander-in-chief of the most powerful fighting force in the ancient world. We see him in the reliefs of the time, depicted as a strong, capable figure. He leads his men on campaigns into Nubia to the south, a region rich in gold and a perennial source of rebellion. These are not grand wars of conquest, but they are real campaigns. They involve long marches under a punishing sun, skirmishes with local tribes, and the collection of tribute. Picture him at the head of his chariot, the reins wrapped around his waist, his bow in hand. He is learning the art of war, the logistics of supply, and the crucial skill of commanding the loyalty of his men. He is earning their respect not through inherited titles, but through shared hardship and proven competence on the battlefield. He is building his own power base, his own network of loyal officers who see him as their leader. The army becomes his family, his world. In this, he is fulfilling the role expected of a king. He is protecting Egypt just as Hatshepsut is nurturing it. The public face of this strange co-regency was one of perfect harmony. On the few monuments where they are shown together, the message is clear. Hatshepsut, as the senior pharaoh Matkare, is the dominant figure. She is larger, she is in the foreground, she is the one making the offering to the god. He stands behind her, a smaller junior partner, the loyal heir supporting his king. The official story was one of unity, but we can imagine the silent tension beneath the surface. Every official, every courtier, every priest would have been aware of this delicate balance. Loyalty in such a court must have been a complicated thing. Does one show deference to the king who sits on the throne today, or to the king who will surely sit on it tomorrow? For 20 years this balance held. But there was another piece on this complex political board, another life that was central to the question of succession. Hatshepsut's own daughter, Neferur. In the early years of the reign, Neferur was everywhere. She was depicted as a princess of supreme importance. She held the old title of her mother, God's wife of Amun, a position of immense religious authority. She was educated by the great Senenmut. She was shown in reliefs as a prominent member of the royal family. It seems clear that Hatshepsut was grooming her for a position of unprecedented power, perhaps even as her successor, a continuation of female rule. If Neferure were to marry her half-brother Thutmose III, it would unite the two lines. If she were to rule herself, it would sideline him completely. For a time, her future seemed the key to Egypt's future. And then, in the quiet, frustrating way that ancient history so often works, she simply vanishes from the record. Around the 11th or 12th year of Hatshepsut's reign as king, the name of Neferure ceases to be carved on monuments. Her titles are reassigned. Her prominent role is left vacant. We do not know what happened. There are no inscriptions detailing her death or a change in her status. Did she die of some sudden illness? Did she fall from grace? We will never know. The official record simply falls silent. The disappearance of Neferure, whatever its cause, had one profound consequence. It made the succession of Thutmose III inevitable. With her daughter gone, Hatshepsut had no other heir of her own body. The silent king, the general in the field, was now the undisputed sole inheritor of the double crown. His patience, it seemed, would be rewarded. Let us picture Hatshepsut in the final years of her reign. She is perhaps in her late 40s or early 50s. The fire of her youthful ambition has settled into the warm, steady glow of established power. Her great works are complete. The myrrh trees from Punt are growing in the gardens of her temple. The story of her divine birth is written in stone for all to see. Her days are filled with the familiar rituals of kingship, the offerings in the temples, the audiences with her officials. The kingdom is quiet, but she must have been aware of the passage of time. The eternal, ageless male form of her statues was a mask, and behind it, a mortal woman was growing older. And all the while, Thutmose waited. He was no longer a boy to be managed. He was a mature man, a proven general with a loyal army at his back. The unspoken contract held. He did not march on Thebes. She did not try to remove him from his command. It was a standoff of immense, silent tension. The entire court, the entire country, seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable day when the great reign of Matkare would come to an end, and the silent king would finally find his voice. The Golden Age was peaceful, prosperous, and profound, but its foundations rested on a delicate 2-decade truce that could not last forever. The end of her story was drawing near, and the beginning of his was about to begin. The afternoon of a great reign is a unique season. The fierce, high sun of ambition and creation has passed its zenith. The long shadows of legacy begin to stretch across the land. For Hatshepsut, the Pharaoh Matkare, this was a time of profound quietude, a period where the echoes of her great achievements were louder than any new pronouncements. The kingdom of Egypt, secure and prosperous, moved to a rhythm she had established 2 decades before. But time, the most patient and persistent force in any kingdom, continues its relentless, silent work. Let your mind settle into this long twilight of her rule. The frantic energy of building and exploration has subsided. The workshops that once rang with the sound of mallet on chisel as they carved the reliefs of Punt are quieter now. The shipyards that constructed the great vessels for the southern voyage are focused on routine maintenance. The grand narrative of her reign has been written. Her autobiography in stone is complete. Her role now shifts from that of author to that of curator, the guardian of a golden age she herself has forged. Imagine the great figures of her court, the pillars that held up the canopy of her power. They too are touched by the passage of time. These were the men who had risen with her, whose fortunes were woven into the very fabric of her revolutionary reign. But the threads of a human life, even the most brilliant, are finite. One by one, the luminaries of her inner circle began to fade. Hapuseneb, the high priest of Amun and loyal vizier, the man who had validated her divine mandate and anchored her power in the temple, would have grown old in his sacred duties. The alliance of throne and temple, which he had so masterfully managed, was now a settled tradition, a smooth and well-worn path. His work was done. And then there is the great mystery at the heart of her court, the fate of the indispensable Senenmut. For years, he had been the most visible man in Egypt, second only to the pharaoh herself, the steward, the architect, the tutor, the visionary, who had turned her grand ideas into physical reality. His name and image were everywhere, sometimes tucked away in a hidden corner of a chapel as a sign of his unique access to the sacred, a privilege no other courtier had ever been granted. He was the architect of Djeser, the engineer of her obelisks, the steward of her daughter. His presence was a constant. a defining feature of her power. And then, like her daughter Neferua before him, he vanishes from the record. In the final years of her reign, his name is no longer mentioned. His work is complete. What became of this brilliant self-made man? Did he simply die of natural causes? His life's great work finished? Or did his ambition, his unprecedented prominence, finally become a threat? Did he fall from grace, banished from the court he had helped to build? Some of his own monuments show signs of being defaced, a hint of official disgrace. But the evidence is scant, a whisper in the historical record. We can imagine a void at the court, a space once filled by his dynamic energy. The great projects had ceased. The mind that had overseen the placement of every stone and the carving of every hieroglyph was gone. This fading of her most trusted advisors would have brought a new sense of isolation to the aging pharaoh. The world she had built was still standing, magnificent and serene. But the fellow architects of her dream were departing, one by one, leaving her alone at the pinnacle of her creation. Let us picture Hatshepsut herself in these final years. The daily rhythm of her life is a procession of sacred duties, unchanging and deeply comforting. She wakes in the cool, dark chambers of the palace before dawn. She is bathed and adorned by her handmaidens, not in the simple linen of a woman, but in the complex regalia of her office. The heavy crowns, the ceremonial kilt, the false beard, the mask of the king, an identity she has inhabited for so long that it has become her truest self. She moves through the great columned halls of the temples at Thebes, performing the daily rituals that ensure the rising of the sun and the stability of the cosmos. She makes offerings to the image of her divine father, Amun-Ra, the god who chose her to rule. Her movements are slow, deliberate, perfected by 20 years of repetition. It is a life of immense privilege, but also of immense weight. A life lived entirely in public, as a symbol, as a vessel for the divine. But beneath the serene mask of the living God, she is a mortal woman, and her body, like all mortal things, is subject to the passage of time. The archaeological evidence of her mummy, discovered centuries later, whispers a story of her final years. It tells us of a woman who was stout, who likely suffered from the aches and pains of arthritis. It suggests she had diabetes, and hidden within her bones, a form of cancer was slowly, quietly growing. We need not imagine any sharp, sudden illness. Rather, we can picture a gentle slowing down, a weariness that even the will of a pharaoh cannot entirely command, a growing awareness of her own mortality, a truth that sits in stark contrast to the eternal youth of her statues. In the cool of the evening, does she look out across the Nile to the western cliffs, to the silent valley where her own tomb lies waiting? Does she contemplate her own journey into the afterlife, a journey she has spent a lifetime preparing for? The silent contract with Thutmose III holds firm to the very end. He remains with his army, a distant but powerful presence. The court, with the subtle instinct for survival that all courts possess, would have begun to slowly reorient itself. It is not an act of treason, but a simple acknowledgement of reality. Messengers would travel between the military camps and the administrative offices in Thebes. Officials, while showing perfect loyalty to Hatshepsut, would ensure their good standing with her inevitable successor. The entire kingdom is in a state of quiet, patient anticipation. The long, peaceful reign of Matkare is drawing to its natural close, and then one day, in the 22nd year of her rule as king, it ends. There is no drama, no final confrontation, no recorded struggle for power. The great pharaoh Matkare, the daughter of Amun, the foremost of noble women, simply dies. The life force that had defied tradition and reshaped an empire leaves its mortal vessel. A profound silence falls over the palace. The news spreads, first in whispers among the highest officials, then carried by runners to the far corners of the kingdom. The god has left the earth. Now begins the final sacred duty owed to a pharaoh, the journey into eternity. Her body is taken by the priests to the Wabet, the pure place, the workshop of the embalmers on the west bank of the Nile. Here begins the slow, meticulous, 70-day process of transforming the mortal flesh of the pharaoh into an eternal vessel for her spirit, her ka and ba. Let your mind rest on this slow, ritualistic process. It is not a gruesome act, but a sacred craft. The body is laid upon a slanted alabaster table. The embalmers, who are high-ranking priests, begin with a prayer. The brain is removed, not because it is considered important, but because it is a source of decay. Then, a careful incision is made in the left side of the abdomen. The vital organs, the liver, the lungs, the stomach, and the intestines are gently removed. They are not discarded. They are considered seats of intelligence and feeling, and they will accompany the pharaoh into the afterlife. They are washed with palm wine, cleaned, and packed in natron to dry. Each organ is then wrapped in linen and placed into its own sacred vessel, a canopic jar, whose lid is carved in the shape of one of the four sons of the god Horus. The heart, the seat of the soul and the conscience, is left inside the body. It will be needed for the final judgment in the underworld, where it will be weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the feather of truth. Now the empty body cavity is cleansed and purified, and the whole body is submerged in a mound of dry natron salt, a natural dehydrating agent gathered from the dry lake beds of the Wadi el Natron. Here it will lie for 40 days. Imagine the profound silence of the embalming house, the stillness broken only by the low chanting of the priests. For 40 days, the salt does its slow, patient work, drawing out every last drop of moisture, arresting the process of decay, preserving the flesh for eternity. When the 40 days are over, the body is removed. It is shrunken, light, and perfectly preserved. It is now ready to be wrapped. This is the final and most intricate stage. Hundreds of yards of the finest, smoothest linen are prepared. The wrapping is a complex ritual. Each finger and each toe is wrapped individually. Amulets of powerful magic are placed at specific points on the body. A scarab beetle over the heart to protect it, an ankh for life, a jed pillar for stability. Priests recite incantations and spells from the Book of the Dead with each layer of bandage. Liquid resin, warm and fragrant like honey, is poured over the wrappings, helping to glue them together and provide a hard protective shell. Layer after layer, the body is built back up, restored to a semblance of its human form. Finally, the famous golden mask is placed over the head and shoulders, and the fully wrapped mummy is placed within a series of nested coffins, each one a masterpiece of gilded wood and inlaid stone. The 70 days are complete. The pharaoh is now an immortal being, ready for her final journey. A great funeral procession is formed. The magnificent coffins are placed on a funerary sled, pulled by oxen. The high officials of the court, their heads shaved in mourning, follow behind. Priests walk before, wafting clouds of incense, and professional mourners, women with their hair unbound and their faces streaked with dust, wail and keen, a dramatic ritualized expression of the nation's grief. The procession moves slowly to the banks of the Nile, where the royal barge is waiting. It is ferried across the river, from the land of the living on the east bank to the land of the dead on the west. As it arrives at the far shore, it is met by more priests and officials. The sled is pulled up from the riverbank into the dry, silent heat of the necropolis, heading towards the secluded royal canyon known as the Valley of the Kings. Her tomb, prepared long ago, lies waiting. It is a long, sloping corridor cut deep into the limestone cliffs. The sarcophagus is carried down the ramp into the cool, subterranean darkness of the burial chamber. The walls are covered with painted texts from the Book of the Dead, a map to navigate the perils of the underworld. The coffin is placed inside the heavy stone sarcophagus. The grave goods, everything she will need for eternity, from furniture to food to her royal regalia, are arranged in the surrounding chambers. A final ritual, the opening of the mouth, is performed on the mummy by the new pharaoh, Thutmose III. With a sacred adze, he touches the mouth of the mummy, magically restoring its ability to speak, to eat, and to breathe in the afterlife. It is his first official act as the sole ruler of Egypt. Then, the priests back out of the tomb. The masons move forward. They place the final blocks of stone in the doorway, sealing it shut. Plaster is smoothed over the blocks, and the royal seal of the necropolis is impressed upon it. It is done. The door is closed. The great reign of Hatshepsut, the pharaoh Matkare, has come to its final, silent end. She is now with the gods, a figure of history, her legacy seemingly secure for all time in the magnificent monuments she left behind. The world of the living now belongs to another. A tomb is sealed, a door is closed. The world outside moves on. In the kingdom of Egypt, the sun rose on a new day and on a new, or rather a newly singular, king. The silent waiting king had finally inherited his throne in its entirety. Thutmose III, the general, the warrior, the man who had spent 2 decades as the junior partner in a silent contract, was now the sole and undisputed pharaoh of the 2 lands. The long shadow of Hatshepsut, which had defined his entire life, was gone, and a new powerful era was about to begin. For the first few years of his sole reign, it seems that nothing changed. The kingdom was stable, the bureaucracy was efficient, and the new pharaoh was busy. He was no longer constrained to minor border skirmishes. He almost immediately embarked on a series of brilliant and aggressive military campaigns into the Near East, transforming Egypt from a peaceful, inwardly focused nation into the head of a true empire. He would become one of the greatest military pharaohs in all of Egyptian history, the Napoleon of Egypt, as he would one day be known. His energy, so long held in reserve, was now unleashed upon the world. And in these early years, the legacy of his predecessor, the great Martkare, was left untouched. Her magnificent temple, Djeser, still glowed in the morning sun. Her towering obelisks still pierced the sky at Karnak. Her statues still stood, serene and powerful, in the temple courts. But then, perhaps 10 or even 20 years after her death, a strange and systematic process began. It was not a sudden, violent outburst of rage. It was a slow, deliberate, and chillingly thorough campaign of erasure. A quiet, patient war waged not against a living person, but against her memory. Let your mind drift and imagine the scene, repeated over and over again, across the great monuments of Thebes. A team of stonemasons arrives at a temple. They are not there to build, but to dismantle a memory. They stand before a beautiful relief, a scene carved 2 decades earlier, showing Hatshepsut as a male king making an offering to a god. The masons take up their chisels and their mallets, and with a steady rhythmic tap, 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 they begin to chip away at her image. They work with precision. They do not destroy the whole wall. They carefully cut her figure out of the scene, leaving a ghostly blank space. Where her cartouche, her name Matkare, was carved, they painstakingly chisel it away, grinding it down until it is nothing but smooth, anonymous stone. Picture them at Karnak, standing before one of her magnificent obelisks. To destroy it would be unthinkable, a sacrilege against the god to whom it was dedicated. So they do something else. They build a wall around it, a massive stone sheath that rises up from the ground, encasing the lower portions of the granite needle, hiding her inscriptions and her story from view, walling her memory up in a prison of stone. They move to her masterpiece, Djeser. Here, the work is even more thorough. They walk through the beautiful colonnades, their footsteps echoing in the quiet halls. They come to the towering Osiride statues of Hatshepsut that line the upper terrace. With ropes and brute force, they topple them, letting them fall and smash upon the stone pavement below. They go to the reliefs of her divine birth, her coronation, her great expedition to Punt. They seek out every instance of her face, her name, her figure as king, and they carefully, methodically cut her from her own story. This was not mindless vandalism. It was a highly organized, state-sponsored effort. Someone gave the order, someone oversaw the work, and the goal was clear: to remove every trace of a woman who had dared to be king. It was an attempt to rewrite history, to smooth over the unprecedented wrinkle in the fabric of tradition. The official king lists carved in later years would omit her name entirely. The timeline would jump directly from her husband, Thutmose II, to her stepson, Thutmose III, as if the intervening 22 years of peace and prosperity had simply never happened. Why? Why would Thutmose III, decades after her peaceful death, seek to erase the woman who had, in a way, been his co-ruler? We cannot know his heart. Was it the final act of a long-simmering personal resentment, the delayed revenge of a man who felt his throne had been usurped for half his life? Perhaps, but it was likely more complex than that, more political than personal. Thutmose III had a son of his own, a future pharaoh. He may have undertaken this erasure to restore the traditional, unbroken line of male succession. He may have wanted to ensure that the radical precedent set by Hatshepsut could never be used as a justification by another ambitious woman in the future. By removing her from history, he was closing a door she had opened, sealing off the path she had forged, and ensuring that the role of pharaoh remained an exclusively male inheritance. It was an act of restoring the conservative order, of upholding the principle of Ma'at as he understood it. He did not erase her memory because she had been a bad ruler. He erased it because she had been a woman ruler, an anomaly that, in his view, needed to be corrected for the sake of cosmic balance. And for almost 3,000 years, he was successful. Her name was forgotten. Her magnificent reign was buried under sand and silence. Her temple, Djeser, fell into ruin. Its smashed statues and defaced walls a silent testament to a story no one could read. History slept, but history, like all deep sleepers, can be woken. The whispers of her story never entirely vanished, and in the 19th century of our own era, a new kind of explorer came to Egypt. They were not seeking gold or conquest. They were archaeologists, armed with trowels and brushes, with a knowledge of ancient languages and a deep curiosity about the past. They began to slowly, patiently uncover the buried world of the pharaohs. They came to the ruins at Deir el-Bahri and were stunned by the beauty of the terraced temple, unlike any other they had seen. As they cleared away the sand and rubble of millennia, they began to piece together the puzzle. They found the smashed statues. They saw the ghostly empty spaces in the reliefs. They noticed that some cartouches had been deliberately erased. They found hidden inscriptions, places the ancient stonemasons had missed. Inside one of her walled-up obelisks at Karnak, her original inscription was perfectly preserved, unseen for 3 millennia. It was the great Egyptologist, Jean-François Champollion, the man who first deciphered hieroglyphs, who began to unravel the mystery. He saw the name Martkare and the name Hatshepsut, and saw the feminine endings that sometimes appeared in the texts. He was confused. The images were of a male king, but the grammar sometimes hinted at a woman. Slowly, painstakingly, over decades of scholarship by countless dedicated men and women, the story was reassembled. The forgotten queen, the female king, began to emerge from the shadows. Archaeologists found her tomb in the Valley of the Kings, and in 2007, a single tooth, found in a box of unrelated relics, was used to identify her mummy among a cache of anonymous royal bodies. After thousands of years of silence, Hatshepsut was given back her name and her story. The attempt to erase her had ultimately failed. And so, our journey through the sands of time comes to a gentle close. We have walked the vibrant streets of Thebes, stood in the silent workshops of sculptors, and felt the cool air of a palace where a princess was born into a world of power, but not expectation. We have felt the quiet, immense weight of tradition, and witnessed the breathtaking audacity of a will that dared to challenge it. We followed the story of a woman who ruled first in shadow, and then in the full brilliant light of the pharaonic sun. She became a king, not through war, but through piety and peace. Her legacy was not in conquered lands, but in fragrant trees brought from a mythical shore, and in a temple of sublime and lasting beauty. She ruled for over 2 decades, a golden age of prosperity and artistic creation, only to have her memory condemned to silence, her name scraped from the stone of her own monuments. Her story is a gentle meditation on the nature of power and the shifting, flowing river of memory. It reminds us that history is not always a simple story of what happened. It is also a story of what was remembered, what was forgotten, and what was, one day, rediscovered. Her struggle shows us how identity can be crafted, worn like a mask, and projected with such force that it becomes truth. And her erasure reminds us that even the most determined attempts to silence the past can ultimately fail. A story as powerful as hers could not sleep forever. Now, as our own time in this ancient world fades, leave the dust and the heat of the valley behind. Leave the whispers of priests and the silent gaze of stone kings. Feel yourself returning to the comfort of your own quiet space, the softness of your bed, the gentle weight of your blanket. The struggles of the first female pharaoh are over. Her journey is complete, and now, so is yours. There is nothing left to do but to let go, to allow the last echoes of this ancient story to dissolve into the quiet rhythm of your own breathing as you drift deeper and deeper into a peaceful and restorative sleep.